Dulce Decorum Est by Wilfred Owen is one of the premier anti-war poems in which the rare thing happens where the poet is not just someone who has, thought about war or, who thinks war is not a good thing, but the poet is actually someone who experienced war himself. Okay, so Wilfred Owen was a soldier in the Great War. Okay, Wilfred Owen was a soldier in the Great War, and he experienced things which are hard to imagine, and he experienced things which at the time were not known to the people who were signing up for the war. So, uh, what he did is he decided that he was going to write a poem, okay, and he wrote many poems which are like this. For example, Disabled, excuse me, is another poem which is similar to this. He wrote poems which were essentially anti-war poems, maybe before the idea of something being anti-war was a thing. This poem was written roughly in the early 1900s and the 1920s, something like that. It's in the early 1900s, okay, it's early. And um, this is at a time you need to remember where uh, the idea of being a patriot, the idea of being a member of the empire, of being British and being proud of Britannia, which has global power or is had global power in the previous century and is still a major force in the world, something that people speak with pride. And and therefore the idea of going against your country, the idea of saying something which would be in contrast with the concept of patriotism and the belief in dying for your country would be something which is uh, not really, wasn't really heard of, okay, and definitely was not the sort of safe or popular or, it's a very dangerous kind of position to be taking, for Mr. Owen to be taking. And it's quite tragic. Uh, he actually died, I believe, on the field, and he died a couple days before the war ended. Yeah, he died a couple days before the war ended. So he lived really, he lived his words, he lived what he spoke, and so which is why it makes sense why his poems, his poetry is still taught to this day, and I still teach it to my own students. It's very powerful. Okay, so the poem begins, bent double like old beggars on the sacks, knock-kneed, coughing like hags, we cursed through sludge, because he was really there, yeah, that's the point. He was really there. Bent double like old beggars on the sacks, knock-kneed, coughing like hags, we cursed through sludge. So right from the outset, he lays out the idea that the soldiers had to experience terrible conditions, and the soldiers themselves being compared to beggars shows that many of them were very poor. Okay, many of them were very poor. Many of them didn't have enough food to eat. Many of them didn't have clothes which were clean. Many of them didn't have clothes which were, they're in war yet in the battlefield, and this is the early 1900s. It's not as if you have great transportation to be rotating your uniforms every week or something. It's not like today with, modern technology where soldiers can have a lot of more sort of it's as much quality of life as you can have on the field. It's way higher, you could say today, as opposed to back in the past, in the days when people are in the trenches. So in any case, he goes on to say, knock kneed coughing like hags, we curse to sludge, coughing like hags because of the exposure to the weather. So their physical health, okay, is deteriorating, and they are walking through mud. They're walking through the mud. Okay. Till on the haunting floors we turned our backs, and towards our distant rest began to trudge. The haunting flares is fire in the sky, and it could be many things this is talking about, but we can just say all of those things are essentially uh, representations of destruction, of looming death. And haunting, when a ghost haunts you, it means it doesn't leave you alone. It's in your house, it's in your mind even, because the real haunting occurs in the mind, as in the person is so afraid that they can't sleep properly. It's in the mind, yeah. And so the soldiers are constantly haunted by the specter of death, by a fire which seeks to destroy them and is always behind them. They can't get away from it. And when they seek rest, when they seek some respite, when they seek to take a break, the place where they have to go is very far, and they have to walk to this place. So you can see that the speaker is explaining that for the soldiers, life is hell. For the soldiers, life is hell. And there's a quote, I believe, which says something like, war is hell. I don't know who said it, but it's a good quote. Everything is difficult for the soldiers, and it's made even more difficult by the fact that they know that it's just a matter of time, essentially, until they are killed. Okay, because death is constantly haunting them, which is very close to the word hunting them. Death is constantly behind them, trying to get them. Men marched to sleep, many had lost their boots. So again, we have a metaphor here with the men marched to sleep. The idea being that the soldiers are so exhausted, they're so tired, it's as if they're sleepwalking in a daze, in a dream, in something which they can't, which they can never escape, really. Even in their sleep, they're still marching. They're still marching. Many had lost their boots, but limped on bloodshot. So even people now are walking, the soldiers are walking barefoot. Okay, they're walking barefoot. All went lame, all blind, drunk with fatigue, deaf even to the hoots. So the effect of war is that it has taken away from the soldiers, okay, not only it's taken away from them their sleep, making them physically exhausted, but he says all went lame means it's taking away their limbs, making them disabled, which he covers in another poem called Disabled. All blind, they can't see. This could be taken literally, as in from the explosions, which at that time, different types of explosives were used, including those which feature gas, which blinds, um, which he's going to talk about in a minute. Um, and obviously, the shelling, the bullets, and all that, the fog of war, as it's called, which really also talks about or hints at the idea that not only is the blinding sort of physical and real, but the blinding is also metaphorical in that, or even metaphysical maybe. The soldiers cannot see past the war. Okay. In other words, they can't see anything beyond where they currently are and beyond the idea of trying to survive and not be killed. They can no longer see home, they can no longer see joy, happiness, they can no longer see ideas of peace. The only thing they have around them is death and trying to stay alive. Also, you can see that whoever they were before they entered the war, whoever they were, okay, as civilians before they became soldiers, has now become cut off from them. They have now become blind to who they used to be, to their previous existence. This goes to also their previous ideas about life and existence itself. The soldiers now, okay, have to deal with the ultimate reality of realities, which is war. And the thing about war, okay, the thing about war which makes it so terrible is that war itself is very much incomprehensible. Okay, war itself is a very messy thing to try to understand. When you're a soldier in war, many things become like muddled up, many things become mixed up, many things become like the mud itself, which they walk through, and the gas, hard to see what's what. And what that does, okay, basically is it takes the war and it forces the soldiers to come up with a very simple sort of philosophy of their existence, which is that I have no idea of what's happening, even why it's happening, why I'm trying to kill these people, why they're trying to kill me. But all I know is that I need to survive. And part of that is I need to kill these people to survive. They have to simplify things down to an extremely simple sort of lens. And they must do that because war itself is extremely complicated. If you ever try and study a war, and try and work out ethically who's correct, who's on the right, who's the good guy, who's not the good guy, you'll find yourself in a very difficult position. Okay, people think war is simple, that the good guys are over here and the bad guys are over there. But war itself is extremely complicated. Okay, it's extremely complicated, which makes it worse. It's worse. If it was simple in terms of working out the ethics, it would make it at least something which you could feel good about fighting. But the worst part of war is that you can fight the war and not even fully know if you're on the right side. Yeah, which makes it worse. Which is why people get shattered by war and face things like PTSD and face things like, you know, the other sort of consequences of it. Okay, anyway, of gas shells dropping softly behind, gas, quick boys, and ecstasy of fumbling, fighting the clumsy helmets just in time. So again, this is one of the early wars. I believe this is talking about World War One. Excuse me, in which gas, okay, was a prominent weapon. Excuse me, and what it's talking about, okay, is the type of gas which melts your skin and which essentially boils you from the inside out. This is before uh, the international bans on gas-based weapons was sort of made global. Not everyone's not still to this day, not everyone follows them. You know, there's some countries which drop sarin gas and those kind of things on civilians, but in any case, at this point, these things were just new inventions. They were new inventions and they were getting shipped out to the battlefield and being used on the enemy. And it was a case of let's see what happens. Okay, this looks like it's terrible. Let's use it on the enemy and maybe it will be something good. Um, but what it did, okay, was it devastated the soldiers to the point that countries got together and they said, okay, this is too much. We're torturing people as well as killing them, which is, you know, which is evil essentially. It's like we don't need to torture each other. We can fight and we can shoot each other, but at the very least we can know that making people face this, like burning them alive, is something which is, you know, beyond the limits of ethical combat. Okay. If we're going to fight and kill each other, at the very least, we should have some standards in how we're going to go about that. There are some people who'd say killing is killing, but the reality is, okay, obviously that most of us know that killing is not killing yet. Most of us understand the difference between respectful combat between two soldiers, two warriors, and the type of sadism that's being described by the gas attack, with people boiling from the inside, the skin melting off, and so on. So one of these gas weapons is dropped. He says someone was still yelling out, stumbling and floundering like a man in fire or lime. So it's like a man is being burned alive, dim through the misty panes and thick green light. As under a green sea, I saw him drowning. So the soldiers have fitted on their gas masks, but this individual was too slow. And so the speaker, and we can imagine that this is the writer, this is Owen himself who experienced this. The speaker is witnessing a man boiling alive from the gas attack, from this chemical weapon, which is making him drown in his own fluid. And if you keep in mind, the idea of drowning is that drowning is the idea that you're being killed by water. That water is the water is sort of so great and so powerful that you can't catch your breath. It's like covers your face, covers your head, and you die a slow death of sort of suffocation while you're fighting to survive. So you can imagine what's happening is the gas has poisoned the air, and so the man doing what was natural, which is to breathe, has now begun to die. And there's nothing he can do to fight off this death. The gas is infecting his lungs, it's infecting his bloodstream, and the man is being killed from the inside out. And this is another thing about war, it's another sort of implication of war, which is that just like drowning is sort of unnatural in the sense that water is the essence of life. Without water, there is no life. And the ocean, scientists tell us, is where life originated. Um, and so it's sort of unnatural to be killed by water, to be killed by the ocean, to be killed by the source of life itself. It's sort of an unnatural, sort of like a perverse twist on how things should be. And the same thing is true of air. okay, of air. Air itself also is necessary for life, in that if you can't breathe, you die. The quickest way for someone to die is the loss of oxygen, right? Being unable to breathe. You can only, roughly, most people can only hold their breath for 3 minutes or less. After that, you die. So, war itself is being demonstrated as also being something which is, in a sense, unnatural. It's like a perversion of how things should be, how things should go, in that it's people killing other people. It's as if it's like with Orwell's A Hanging when he says, I'd never noticed what it was like to cut short the life of a perfectly healthy man, to destroy a perfectly healthy man. It's the same thing here, okay, which is that soldiers must do one of the most unnatural things imaginable, which is to kill another healthy person. In other words, the other person isn't dying, but you kill him, which is something which is beyond comprehension if you think about having to actually sit with the fact that you have taken someone's life. You can imagine why you would have so much trauma from that. If you are a decent, normal kind of person, that's gonna mess you up in a way which you can't imagine. Because you'd be thinking that not only have I killed someone, but I've cut short the rest of their potential life, as in their family no longer has a future with them. Whatever they were dreaming about, whatever they thought about doing with their life is no longer going to happen. That I've killed someone who shouldn't have died, that had years left to live, and I was the one that took away those years. I'm the one that's responsible for them dying. So you can see what's happening here is this is sort of again representing the sort of unnaturalness of war, which goes to the heart of the poem, being a sort of anti-war poem, being a poem which is against war as a whole. And I think it was Napoleon, I'm not sure if it was Napoleon, but I believe it was Napoleon who said something to the effect of everybody is for war, everybody believes in war, everyone's excited about war except the soldiers who actually have fought it. Except the soldiers who actually have fought it. It's only soldiers who know the reality of war, who know that it's a terrible thing, but the politicians and the people who are way in the back behind the front, nowhere near the front line, they're way, way miles away, safe, behind oceans or, kept safe in highly secure buildings. It's only these people and the average civilian who has never touched a gun or had to kill someone. It's only these people, the ignorant, essentially, the blissfully ignorant due to the self-sacrifice of the soldiers. It's only these people who are excited about war, who think war is a good thing. In a in a in a, another book, Fahrenheit, I forget the title exactly. I think it's Fahrenheit 57, something like that. I forget the exact title. Uh, the writer in there says a quote, which is that there's nothing intelligent you can say about war. Nothing intelligent you can say about war. He's talking about the bombing of Dresden. Dresden. In any case, the writer describes war for us to try and give us a good idea of it. But you can see, okay, that he doesn't make it look nice at all because it's not. There's nothing nice about it. Okay. In all my dreams from my helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning. So here he describes his nightmares, okay, that he can't get away from. That every night before he goes when he's sleeping, he sees this man who died, who drowned. He sees him in his dreams, reaching out for him, asking for help, begging for help, and there's nothing that he can do. There's nothing that he can do. And what he's doing, the writer, okay, by explaining this, what he's doing, okay, is that he is laying out essentially you could say he's laying out the uh, concept of PTSD long before the idea was ever a thing. Um, and what he's doing, okay, is he's trying to tell the average civilian this is what war is actually like. So don't be excited to go and fight. So the whole poem is called Dulce Decorum Est, and he refers to this as being a lie. Dulce Decorum Est, I believe, is a line by Virgil, the poet, the Italian poet from back in the day, who essentially said it is sweet and fitting to die for your country, talking about the old ideas of patriotism and honor and that kind of thing. Honor and being a soldier for your king and for your country. But Owen is taking a different take and he's saying, look, you're not gonna be a hero who's gonna magically kill people and feel great about it like some old Disney film. Huh? He's saying in reality, it's muddy, it's dirty, it's horrible, it's disgusting, and what you do in this place and what you see in this place will never leave you. Okay, you will be haunted by it forever. And he goes on to describe the man dying, and it goes on to describe um, how exactly he died, how the blood was shooting out of his mouth, and how his lungs slowly began to collapse. And he calls it obscene as cancer. I was quite surprised that he mentioned the word cancer here. I didn't know, I didn't think they knew about this, about cancer back then, but obviously that they did. To what extent, I'm not sure. But you can say here that it has a double or triple meaning in this phrase, obscene as cancer, which is that the way the man died is as obscene as cancer. It's as horrible, as disgusting, as unacceptable as cancer. To be killed by something which you can't fight back against. It's one thing to be killed by another person where you have a chance of fighting and you have a chance of winning, killing the other person, but to be killed by some chemical, some poison, is like being killed by cancer in that you have no ability to fight back. At least at his time, they had no chemo or anything like that, right? And also, the war itself is like as obscene as cancer in that once you become a soldier in the war, your ability to now decide your own fate is gone, essentially. You get sent out for war, you must obey, right? General says go to the front line, you say what? Yes, sir. And you give your life from the speaker's perspective, you give your life for people who don't care about you, who would not do the same, who would leave you out in the front and are using you as a human shield to protect them. That's a writer's perspective. Perspective of many soldiers, especially those who see their friends die, as the writer obviously has here. Okay, now he goes on to finish off the poem, okay, by saying, if you were here with us, okay, and seen all these things which he has described for us, if you were here with me, then you wouldn't brag and sing and explain and call for so eagerly the idea that kids should go and fight and die for their country. You wouldn't make stories and songs about it. You wouldn't lie about it from the writer's perspective. You wouldn't lie about Dulce Decorum est is sweet and fitting to die for your, and then pro patria mori, to die for your fatherland. Patria is fatherland, your homeland. So to die for your nation, as in to be a soldier for your country, to be a patriot, is not something which should be celebrated in the writer's eyes because it is a death sentence. And it is a death sentence which more particularly impacts and is sent upon the ones who have the most life to live, to the young, which he calls children. He calls them children. Okay, it means that they have no real ability to think about what they're doing. Their emotions are the thing that is driving them, their desire for heroism and to be great, to be seen as great. From the writer's perspective, this is not something good. This is a lie. They're being deceived in that they're being sold off to fight for not glory, but for power or for other things, for personal gain and so on. And also, um, the fact is that most of these individuals, like the writer describes, none of the people in this poem have a name, and so most of these individuals will not be remembered. Okay, they will be forgotten, um, unfortunately. And so, from the writer's perspective, it is a lie essentially, and it is something which needs to be stopped. Okay, so again, one of the sort of greatest anti-war poems ever written, written by a soldier who died on the field, and so something which we should take, and consider very seriously, um, and to take pause with ever thinking about, the real takeaway is war should only ever be a last resort. War means there are no other options, no other doors which are open. And so the reality is that as long as there is a hope, a chance of a door being open, that we should pursue that chance and that door, no matter what. Because once war starts, it's a fire that you can't put out except with blood. The price of war is blood, and often innocent blood. So it's not something to be joked about or taken lightly. Okay.